Mobile hunters, our buddies over at Tethered, are always innovating to keep us more mobile and in the game when it counts. From the Tethered One Sticks, the Fast Pack, to the Ultra Lock Saddle, Tethered is always designing to increase comfort and utility while reducing bulk, weight, and fiddle factor of mobile hunting gear. And now, they've outdone themselves yet again by creating the carbon fiber forged Predator CFX platform, the latest fully featured mobile saddle platform that raises the bar for what's possible in mobile hunting gear. Whether you're new to saddle hunting or an old tree climbing veteran, go to tetherednation.com for all your saddle hunting gear. Welcome to the Truth from a Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 373. Today, we're coming to you from the Cumberland Estate, fresh off a quail hunt from a house I think is haunted. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you're doing well. Hope you are feeling fine. This is kind of a different podcast that we're doing this week. I'm going to keep this up front really short just so we can kind of jump into it. But we'll talk about it a little bit at the beginning. Aaron and I will. He and I had a chance to go do a quail hunt and hunt behind some killer dogs. So we jumped at the opportunity just so it happened to coincide with the weekend that we got a ton of snow. So Aaron and I were able to bail on the cold. Well, it was still cold in Virginia, but we were at least able to bail on the snow, get out, stretch our legs, and do a little bit of hunting and do a little hanging out, which was awesome. And we talk a little bit about the house that we were in, feeling like it might have been haunted. We both kind of got the heebie-jeebies a little bit. And then maybe just to kind of give you a heads up at the very end of this episode, with maybe 3 minutes left or so, the audio kind of got weird. And it's never happened to me before, where I could see visibly while I was recording, the audio track was acting kind of funky. And it's never done it before prior to that. And I kind of checked everything out when I got home, and it's working fine as I'm using it right now to record this. So that is my, I don't have any scientific proof, but that is my own kind of proof in the pudding of there being spirits in that 200 or however old that house was, that was built and used during Civil War era and things of that nature. One last piece of housekeeping to kind of pass along to you guys. Great American Outdoor Show coming up here on February 3rd. It starts Friday. I will be there on Saturday. I'm sorry, not Friday, on Saturday. It's February 3rd. I will be there in the Exodus booth in the archery hall. I forget the booth number, but they're the same place they've always been. And then I'll also be sliding over to the Tethered booth, which is just right behind basically where the Exodus booth is. So I'll be kind of splitting my time between those two places. If you plan to be there this weekend on Saturday, make sure to stop by one of the two booths and say hello. We'd love to chat with you, talk a little deer hunting, see how your season went, and just chop it up. So with that, we're going to go ahead and just jump into today's show. As always, thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today, we are coming to you on location. And I say we, because no, I do not have a mouse in my pocket. I have one Mr. I might have a ghost in my pocket.
Might.
Actually.
Or in the room next door. Who knows?
You hear the dulcet tones of one Mr. Aaron Hepler. What's going on, man?
Not much, buddy. It was a fun day.
It was a fun day. We'll jump into it here in a second, but just to kind of, let's give the people at home a little, I guess,
set the atmosphere here.
A lay of the land. Yeah. Lay of the land, right?
Yeah.
We are, Aaron and I are bougieing it up this weekend.
Super bougie.
We're super bougie right now. We're actually sitting in a Civil War era farmhouse.
Yep.
In Virginia.
Yeah. It's like 18 rooms in this house.
There is like 18 rooms in this house, of which 17 are haunted.
Yep.
I've come to find out. I've determined as soon as I got here, I walked in, opened the door, and no lie, like my immediate thought was like, this place is haunted. Like it was like the first thing I thought of. I was like, there's
no way that this house is in this area with all like the Civil War kind of history that this area has.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it when you just on the property. You can imagine it.
Yeah, it's a little. Well, even when we were looking into the dining room right before we started recording,
Yeah,
you were like, I was going to walk in there to see if there was water in there.
I decided not to.
And I turned around and I looked through the doorway as well. You were like, go ahead and walk in there. And I looked in and I was like, nah,
I'm good.
I'm solid. I'm going to stay right here. And then I, in fact, shut the door to that room. It was like,
Got a little cold.
yeah. And if that door happens to open up at some point during the night, I'm going to lose my shit. Just saying.
Or while we're podcasting.
You'll hear me scream like a woo man on the podcast. But no, Aaron and I are actually staying at a place called Cedar Lane is what it's called. We got an invite actually from the folks at Cumberland Estate, which Cumberland Estate, we're kind of learning about it, while we're here for the weekend. Just about like the history of it and stuff like that, because it's basically this big house, I guess you could say, right? Home or plantation home, I think it was
Massive
at one point.
home.
Yeah. That is an estate. They host all kinds of things here. They host things from weddings to bachelor parties to business kind of meetings. And like when you do these types of things, you could have a weekend getaway with like a bachelor party or whatever, and you can go hunt quail, or you can, so they do things like that. And it's kind of rooted in and around the outdoors and having like outdoor experiences and stuff like that. And so we got an invite to come down just to kind of check out the grounds, do a quail hunt.
Yep.
Kyle and what was the other guy's name? The other guy with the dogs?
Patrick.
Patrick.
Yep.
Kyle had a lab and Patrick had a couple pointers, and
Beautiful
came out.
dogs.
Beautiful dogs. Worked really, really well. I've never personally hunted with birds or hunted birds with dogs before. I've hunted with dogs when I was growing up, but mainly just rabbits. Like when my dad and I pheasant hunted and stuff like that, it was always just he and I going out and trying to jump pheasants for each other, essentially, And so I never bird hunted with dogs. So whenever they reached out and was like, hey, we'd love for you to come down and check out the grounds, do a quail hunt with us, learn a little bit of the history, et cetera, et cetera. And in return, they were like, if you had a good time, just talk about us or whatever. And so I was like, cool, I've never done this before. I was like, so let's check it out. And so I brought, wanted to bring Aaron along just to kind of have the experience with me. And dude, quail hunting's fun.
It was fun.
I like bird hunting I don't want to say for another reason because I don't want to diminish it, but for the same reason I liked goose hunting or duck hunting, because it was very low stress for me and low expectations.
Yeah, I mean, well, everybody says it. There's no trophies in quail hunting, right? I mean, maybe you make a really good shot, and that is what you consider the trophy. But like nobody's measuring a quail.
My quail was bigger than your quail, Aaron.
My quail did lose its head. One of the quails I shot lost its head. But I mean, the fun of it is you get that like camaraderie thing. You get to, we got to talk to the guides, and they were cool dudes.
Super good dudes.
Got to hang out with them, and then just watch their dog. I've never I've hunted over dogs for pheasants a lot and stuff like that, but not like that. Like that like 1-2, that guy's pointers were incredible. Like they stopped at every single covey or single bird. And then that combination of them
honoring the one who found.
Yeah. The one pointer stopping and pointing, and the other one stopping to honor the one that found the bird. And then having the lab wait till we get there. And then he tells the lab to go get it, and the pointer stay on point, and then the lab just works in between them and flushes it out.
Yeah.
That was amazing. I've never seen dogs work together like that. He said that was their first time hunting together too.
Yeah, cause that's Kyle said that shoot, I forget the lab's name now. Gunner, yeah. Gunner had never hunted with the two pointers before. The two pointers obviously had hunted together, worked together before.
Yeah.
Because Patrick raised them, trained them, and Patrick's a retired game warden officer from Virginia.
Yeah.
I guess you should mention that Cumberland Estate is in Virginia. I think we're in an area called Kentway, if I'm not mistaken.
New Kent.
New Kent. Yeah, sorry. I'm really screwing this up as far as like the names go.
Hopefully Patrick's right.
Patrick, yeah.
Patrick, you know who we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it was crazy how the pointers would kind of basically find the birds, and one, like whichever one was closest would point.
Yeah.
And then the other one would basically come behind it and just stand like at attention. It was really kind of odd to watch because I really didn't know what they were doing at first because I'd never experienced that.
Mm-hmm.
And then Patrick was saying, "Oh, the second one is honoring
the first one's
position
point.
of the first one or the point of the first one."
Yeah.
And then Gunner would come up behind it and basically sit, and we'd be able to kind of get behind the dogs, and then he'd basically just tell them to hunt them up. And then dude would go in and flush them out, and then Aaron would I'd miss them.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I thought honestly, I thought they would be a little faster than they were on the flush. Mm-hmm. When they got out, then they were gone.
Yeah.
But these birds like fly out and they just kind of hover over the grass for a second before they take off.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was so weird, like they would fly, like when they flushed a covey, like more, like, 3 or more birds, one of them would always come in your face when you're trying to get the other one. So you're like kind of confused and like, I caught one in my hand at one point.
Right. Yeah.
Bird flew up and I
grabbed it. Yeah. The interesting thing was, I haven't hunted birds in, ducks and geese notwithstanding.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't hunted like
upland
birds. Yeah. Since I was probably a junior in high school.
Oh, wow.
Probably was the last time I hunted. Because, my dad and I would go out and hunt pheasants every now and then. That was really it. Like once I was gone to college and was off and gone, it was like big game hunting or I wasn't hunting, essentially. Right. And so even and I haven't hunted ducks or geese in probably 2 years.
Yeah.
At least 2 years. And so I haven't shot at flying birds often at all.
Yeah.
In the recent past.
Right.
And so even like getting back on the gun,
yeah,
to try to get on a bird that's flying, it's like trying to figure out how far, because I remember the first one, like you missed and I missed one of that first flush, and you were like, how far should I lead these things again?
Yeah.
The guy was like, dude, like right in front of him.
Yeah.
And I still missed a couple more after that, and I finally started realizing that I needed to actually let the birds get a little further out, because once you said it, it made sense, because like, man, I'm trying to shoot now the one I did shoot was like right on top of me.
Yeah.
That was actually a pretty good shot. But it's weird because some of them were flying out and sticking so low to the ground.
Yeah.
And you don't shoot them whenever they're low to the ground. You also don't want to get in jeopardy of hitting a dog,
right,
and stuff like that. So you want to let them get up far enough, and it's just, it's, if you don't do it often, it's there's a lot kind of going on until you kind of get your vibe.
Yeah, I'm probably in the same boat. I haven't hunted pheasants. The last time I took my dog hunting pheasants was 3 or 4 years ago now. So I haven't really, painted a bird out of the sky for a while either. Right. And leading a bird is not, they're all different, right? Like if you're leading a dove, you be 8 feet in front of that thing and hit the dove. But these birds flew really different. But it was helpful to let them get out. Get out of ways, because they kind of stabilized their flight and they were a little more predictable, I felt. Yeah. Because that finally, when I like connected with that one that was across that I don't know, that ditch or that drainage ditch.
Yeah.
I finally hit that one. They're like, holy crap, I can't believe you shot that thing all. I'm like, I told you, I just needed to let it get out a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
And then we kind of got a little groove. Going there then.
Yeah. So I ended up only ended up killing 2 doves.
Quail.
3, I guess.
Quail.
I'm sorry, quail. Yeah, jeez.
Quail. Birds.
There's winged things. Quail. Sorry.
It's like,
so I guess 3.
It is 10:30 at night. So
dude, this is my bedtime right now. So not gonna lie, this is getting up on my bedtime.
Full belly, honeycomb ice cream.
I know. Yeah. Then they fed us afterwards. Made us had some duck breast, and we actually ate some quail.
Yep.
Had some dessert.
It was delicious. That chef, top notch.
Yeah.
Top notch to the Cumberland Estate.
Had a beverage. which had 2 beverages. Actually, I'm not gonna lie, had 2 beverages.
I had some water.
You had some water.
It was good.
Yeah, you were good. But no, it was awesome, man. Like I thoroughly enjoyed it. Just good company, like fellowship.
Yeah.
Good dudes to hang out with, good conversation, awesome dogs working, and it was just a super cool experience. And then getting ready to being able to sit around the table after eating tonight and just cutting it up with Kyle and just talking hunting. And stuff
we
like
spent 2 hours swapping hunting stories.
Yeah.
He's a pretty well-rounded guide. Like he's done a lot of, some deer guiding. It sounded like in Georgia.
Yep.
And just
lots of ducks.
Yeah, lots of ducks. That's his thing is the birds and the dogs and stuff. But even got to talk to him about his elk hunt in Utah. And
which was a complete disaster. That was one of the best.
Everything.
They killed elk.
They killed 4. It sounded like, but it was just cool. And it was fireside. They were throwing logs on the fire in the giant dining room in that place.
In that haunted place.
That place is probably a little more haunted than this place.
So that place that we were in, like it's I want to say it was like 18. Shoot, I'm gonna get the date wrong now. I thought I saw a document in there because the place is a place where they'll host like a dinner or like a business meeting or
last week
whatever.
They had 24 people out for a business meeting and the owner was actually at that one.
Yeah. And they went out and did a quail hunt and stuff like that. The grounds are huge. They own like thousands. There's thousands of acres essentially like where that place is at. Plus they have like a bunch of other kind of pieces around.
Didn't he say 7? He said
I thought 7,000 like roughly was like the acreage that they have in total.
In chunks, yeah.
But it was that particular house, the Cumberland Estate itself, has like a lot of history with it, which was cool. So they gave us a tour of it and kind of showed us a lot of the stuff that they've actually gotten from the ground. So like they had a bunch of arrowheads and stuff like that were found in the grounds. They had like a bunch of recovered Civil War memorabilia,
stuff. A musket and bullets and cannonballs. And it was cool.
Yeah,
the anchor from the ship.
Yeah,
that came up the river.
Yeah,
because this is part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed, right? Is that what they were saying?
I would think so.
I think it is, and because she did say that the water on drought years gets pretty salty.
Yes.
And she said when they do have drought years, like everybody scours the rivers because you can just find all this stuff.
Yeah, because people were just throwing their trash at that time, or what they deemed as trash.
Yeah, so all the bullets and fragments and things that you can find, plus all that other cabinet was just full of like seashells and shark teeth.
Yeah,
that they
megalodon, was it a megalodon?
Yeah, megalodon and all that stuff that they had in that case that they find in these little creeks here and stuff.
Yeah, which is just
cool.
crazy to think of. The other cool thing was like the document that had the picture of the camp, the Civil War camp that was set up here. I mean, it was just
hundreds of tents.
Yeah, it was insane. Like
wild.
So it was just, and there was the church where George Washington got married. Did I hear that right? Because I thought I heard that, but I was looking at something else in the case when she said it.
I didn't catch the details of the church either, but they turned it into a hospital. Because
she said she mentioned the First Lady, and so there's a church that's, I think that they have now.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken, that was the church where Washington got married.
Yeah,
I forget this is terrible. You should know this. Like, as a patriot, you should know who the first lady is. But he was married there, and then eventually, like the North took it over and turned it into a hospital. But that's actually in this town.
Yeah.
Whatever. So just overall, super cool trip. But I'm always curious, like, because we're deer hunting nerds, like, I found like, so they don't, these grounds that we were on today does not get deer hunted.
No.
Like
not the one that we
quail hunted.
Have some properties that are hunted, just not the one we hunted.
Yeah, just the one where we were quail hunting today. Right. There is no deer hunting allowed.
Which looks like baller deer.
Looks like baller deer habitat. Like I was thinking that the whole time.
I was like, "Where's the sheds at?"
Yeah. And I found no less than 3 like huge 4-finger tracks.
Plenty.
Like while I was walking, I was like, they were the first one I remember seeing, and I asked it because they actually had a guy out that was doing like some videography and stuff like that for him today, and super good dude too.
Yeah.
He's actually originally from New York. Super good dude. And we were walking along. We were talking about deer hunting, and I walked and I saw this track. I was like, "Holy shit, man!" I was like, "Did you see that track?" He's like, "Yeah, they're all over here." And I was like, "Do they hunt? Like, does anybody hunt this?" He's like, "No, nobody hunts it." I'm like, "Dude, there's got to be giants here." And he was like, "Yeah, there's giants here." And the crazy thing was, like, he was showing me some pictures of just like some deer he's had on camera, like in this area, and some buddies of his, and he actually does deer recovery using
thermal drones or whatever.
Thermal drones. He does deer recovery using thermal drones.
He was kind of starting a business off of it.
Yeah, he's killing it too.
Yeah.
And the deer that he was like, some of the deer he was showing me that were recovered in this area, it was just, I couldn't believe they were coming from Virginia. Like, I know Virginia has big deer in certain areas, and what I really know of Virginia is, as far as big deer go, is probably from Nathan Killen.
Yeah.
Right. And that's north of here, if I'm not mistaken, and Appalachian Mountain type of situation. But in this area where we're not far from like Virginia Beach, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think Virginia Beach is too terribly far.
I saw exit signs for it on the way here.
So it's like we're not far from there. And I would have just never guessed that this area had the caliber of deer that he was showing me. Now you're not talking like Kansas caliber. I mean, there was some 160s and
the host, the young lady host that was there tonight. She said her boyfriend, he shot a deer. That deer was a hammer, massive.
Yeah, it was a big deer.
I mean, it was an 8-point, right?
And it was probably it was 140-inch 8-point.
Yeah,
I would
140-inch 8-point easy. I would say that.
Yeah, and that's a giant for an 8-point.
Yeah, it was a big, big deer.
Yeah. So Brain is never far away from deer hunting. When we go somewhere, and so I was finding those tracks. But the other thing, and this is one thing that I loved doing, even whenever I was working with my lab Rocky, teaching him how to find sheds, and admittedly screwing it up because he was, and Tony Peterson kind of corrected me on this, was like, as opposed to him finding the shape, like he was at first just getting him to retrieve was good, but whenever I needed to really kind of work him to be able to really shed hunt, I needed him to find the shape as opposed to just smell my hand.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it was funny because I could watch Rocky work, and how he was using his nose to find the shed, and I was like, "Oh, you cheater! Like you're using your nose."
And he's not trying to look for a shed; he's trying to smell your scent.
Yeah, yeah. And so that being said, it was still like interesting watching him work because again, I go back to saying like I haven't hunted with dogs since I was a kid hunting rabbits with my uncle, and so I don't get to see a dog work that often. And so watching those dogs work today with their nose to find coveys of quail, was awesome, and it gives you an appreciation, just like watching how the air is kind of moving and how they're using it.
Oh yeah, I mean the winds were pretty steady.
Yeah.
When they were blowing, and you could tell the dogs their nose was in it the whole time. The touching the air, licking the air. And pointers are so cool. They're just so unique. I have another buddy at home that has 2 pointers, and we were at a 4th of July thing with him this year, and there was a songbird like landed in the yard. Now he has a dog. I don't know how old his dogs are, but I know one of them is kind of still a puppy, and the other one is an adult dog. The adult dog was stalking, like, doing the slow crawl to the bird to be like in pointing range of that bird, and it would just point. The other dog was copying everything that dog was doing to like learn from the older dog. It was was really cool, and it just like, all right, get it, and then have the dog pound, because that's one thing you train pointers eventually, like they have to be able to flush the bird too. So
right.
It's cool. It's so cool to watch dogs like that.
Yeah. What I always like to watch them do is just, I try to think about how they're using the wind, and then thinking about, thinking of them as a deer.
Yeah.
And how they're and how essentially I'm the quail and the dog is the deer.
Right.
essentially, and watching how that game is kind of being played between the
Right.
two. Man, the one dog had a super long point at the end of that, going out that point.
Yeah. At the end.
That was crazy because that was like, I don't know. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that was at least like a 60
yards,
yard,
yeah,
40 to 60 yard point,
yeah.
where we came up and had Gunner, the lab, go to flush.
And he ran way out there.
And we're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And they stopped him, because we're way too far to shoot at this point, right? And so then we all walk up and like the dog's point again, like immediately, Gunner goes to find him again, and it's like, and he's too far away. Whoa, 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 whoa. I had to move up again. Like,
it was because we had that steady wind right along the edge of that point.
Yeah. It was just ripping right up over. And so if you think about that and you're hunting along points and stuff like that, and you think about how far your wind carries, like that was a bird the size of my hand.
Yeah. And it's funny because you have, think about it in deer hunting scenario. When you go scouting, where do you find the most tree stands?
Mm-hmm.
On the end of a point.
Yeah.
They're on the end of a point where the deer is bedding. There is no way you're getting to that stand on the end of the point unless you know that deer is not there.
100%.
And you can, a dog has a really good nose. A deer has probably I don't know. Do they have better noses? I think they have better noses.
By far. Yeah.
So when you look at the end of that point, I'm sure the dog could smell the end of that point. The end of that point was 200 yards down the ridge with a wind like that. And it was a perfect wind. It wasn't like ripping so hard that they were, trying to figure out what was swirling. It was not, a steady 14 mile an hour, breeze.
It was exactly what you would want if you were bow hunting.
Yeah.
It's like, it's that perfect range of like,
overcome the thermals.
Consistent. The deer can be confident because they're getting a true, a true wind.
Yeah.
They can use. You as a hunter are getting a true wind that you can use, on that type of wind. It's funny because I think even, I want to say when Chad and those guys at one point did like a bunch of their trail camera kind of data examination.
Mm-hmm.
And this is probably like, he probably mentioned it maybe 3 years ago. Maybe it was only 2 years ago, but it's been a little while that they found like a sweet spot for deer activity relative to wind speed.
Yeah, right.
And it was around that like
10 to 14
mile per hour is like what you really wanted. And I've even talked to I can't remember his name now. I don't know why. Jason Michaels.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like his sweet spot too. Is the same thing. And it's not a surprise. Why, when you watch a dog work like that, and you get that steady wind, and you watch an animal that's going to rely on his nose to. Dog's not trying to survive, but he's trying to do his job that he's been trained to do, and that wind is just like perfect for him to be able to do it. Like they were so on point with finding birds and just right on them.
Yep.
That it was unreal.
Yeah, it was really cool to watch. I think too, when you're talking about wind speeds and different things in deer hunting scenarios, like, everybody's like, well, there's like all that different train of thought. Well, you can't kill a deer from a couch, or like you either have like the guys that are like, go every day, or the guys that are like, I'm only going to go if the weather's just right. And like, in some sense, you just have to go when you have to go. But if you have the opportunity to like stack a couple things, like, let's say that you have a lot of family obligations and you have one day that week to hunt, like stack the weather in your favor. If that's the day, if you have like 3 days to pick from, but you can only pick one, those are things that you want to be thinking about.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, like when you think of all the factors of picking your optimum day to hunt in whatever number of days you have off, or however many days you have that week to hunt, like where does wind rank for you? And is it always, I guess, weighted as a priority in relationship to wind direction or wind speed, or kind of both at the same time?
A little bit of both. I think direction is most important because it's, I mean,
Going
that's
to dictate where you're going to set up.
right. It's going to dictate that, but and more importantly, your access.
Yeah.
But wind speed, if it's a wind speed, it's a factor of like, I don't like to hunt in 30-mile-an-hour wind.
Right.
Like 25. I'm not saying it's a cutoff. Like if I have a spot that's like tucked in and the wind direction's right and I know it doesn't get pounded, then I might go if it's 30 something.
A bad wind day, essentially.
Yeah.
Like as far as like strength goes or speed goes.
But when I get up into the mid 20s and if I know I'm gonna be like rocking and rolling all day, like I can't do that for very long.
I pretend I'm Lieutenant Dan
Yeah.
in Forrest Gump. You will not sink this boat.
I mean, if I'm gonna do that, then I do more like, I mean, that's a really good time to experiment, to be completely honest. Like if you're not good at the ground thing, like a windy day, as long as it's steady and you're in an area that's not like going to swirl on you or whatever, like, hey, that's a good idea to get out of the tree and go walk around. I've done some of that like kind of spot and stalk thing through clear cuts. When the wind, obviously you got to have some that don't have like a low canopy that you can't see over. You're talking like a couple-year-old cut that's basically like something you would burn hunt through. You can kind of do like a spot and stalk through there, and it doesn't matter what you're stepping on most of the time because it's blowing and everything's loud. I mean, that's a really good time to learn stuff like that.
That was how I snuck up on that buck on the North Piece. On that second, because it was the same kind of setup. Like I jumped out
when
a little
you were
bit
coming out when you were what?
Yeah, I came out. I came out early, I guess technically speaking, because I still had a little bit of light, but I had like in the timber, the canopy, I lost light from my pin.
Yeah,
and so I was able to slide out and kind of walk along, and
right.
I had enough wind cover that I could kind of move and not have to worry about anything kind of hearing me as I got up along those cuts.
Right. And I'm not telling you to, go run around the woods. You don't want to go ruining other people's hunts or like, and the other thing too is you got to remember, like if it's something you haven't done before, you got to take your time because you haven't learned yet, like how much can you get away with and that kind of thing. But
right.
I think that's a good day to like just kind of experiment or,
right.
Glass scout. Those are good things to do.
So let me ask you this. So you were saying that, that wind direction is probably the more important, right, than the wind speed being the second. Because like if it's going to be 30 mile per hour, like you're going to have to think about where you're going to be differently. Or if it's going to be 20, I'm going to be rocking and rolling all day. Like it might make a different decision. But say you have the right, and that's basically saying like I've got the wind direction I want for my access for the place I want to hunt, but the wind speed is kind of a deterrent at this point. Say you have the wind direction. Say you need a north wind, just to make it easy, and to access this spot, and the north wind is what you need to also hunt it. We'll just make it simple. And you're not going to have. It's not going to be 10 to 14 miles per hour. It's not going to be your perfect ideal wind. It's not going to be 30 miles per hour. It's not going to be one of those that you're getting buffeted around, right?
Right.
But it's going to be that like 3 mile per hour, light and variable.
Yeah.
Are you still hunting one of your better spots with the right wind direction, even if it's a light and variable wind, like say 3 miles per hour roughly?
Yeah, I think so, because I think it depends on the time of the year. Like I'm probably not going to do that in the first 2 weeks of October, where maybe a pattern is a little more predictable. If I know I need a north wind and I have light and variable winds, I know that wind is going to blow from the south at some point, especially because there's more leaves on the trees and things are all whacked. But otherwise, like when you're hunting big woods bucks, you get in a spot and they use that spot, but you really don't know which direction they're coming from.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in like whatever, everybody wants to call it a hub. If you're in a hub of activity and there's 18 trails that of around that area, you don't really know where anything's coming from. There's this doe bedding and this doe bedding. So then I kind of like think of it in that light, like okay, the buck's main focus is going to be these two bedding areas. So what winds can I get away with the best, and how should I set up? So when he's coming through that transition, how can I make sure my wind is staying away from that deer? I actually did that kind of this year with that buck that I hit. There,
Because I don't even think we've talked since
we probably
archery
didn't.
season. Yeah.
I don't know if we talked about this on the podcast, but I hit a really big 10-pointer.
It was really big. It was legit.
Yeah, it was a good one.
Yeah,
it's a heartbreaker.
Let's talk about it some more. Why don't we?
Yeah, we can talk. We can talk about it some more. I think the reason, we were talking about scrapes with Kyle tonight, and we were talking about like community scrapes and the ones that are used, all year round. The one thing that I find that's really hard to find in postseason scouting is scrapes that they use on transition. Like, and we'll talk about it now because this is like kind of the specific area. There is sometimes a pretty big scrape that gets hit often and early in this particular spot. But for the last 3 years in a row, there has been a small line of scrapes. And I'm talking like, they look like turkey scratchings. Like the deer kicked something, just very small, tiny scrapes. And last year on November 1st, I had that big 8-pointer that I was chasing last year. I had him on camera in the spot that I hit the 10-pointer this year. And I'm not like, oh, maybe the 8-pointer will come back, but I was hunting that spot because I know it's a spot mature bucks like to go, probably because there's some kind of fawn drop that happens at that time, whatever it happens to be. But there's two bedding areas. There's kind of like a point
or a fawn drop that times out that where they're being bred at that particular time. Yeah.
Correct. So there's a point that's all brushy that does like to bed on, and it's a wide point. It's not like a spine back ridge or anything. It's just like a wide point that kind of drops off, not gradually, but not
a sheer drop.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a bedding point, and then there's right on this side, there's like I will call it an oval of brush, right? And in between that, the scrapes come off the point and they go around the top of that, and then they go down along the side of it. And typically we get like a northwest wind there, usually something out of the north, and always some westerly kind of winds. And I found this 2 years ago that they were starting to make like they made this little scrape line. And if you put a camera on it, you'd probably never get a buck on it. Because I think 1 or 2 bucks open these scrapes and they get pissed in once or twice. And then if you put a camera on it, you probably get a couple does that hit it. But those bucks are just using that scrape line to scent check those bedding areas as they go along. Because I know that oval one that I'm talking about, there's a couple of those that go down the ridge. And they just kind of funnel along the top of that scrape line or the bottom of that scrape line. So I think those are the ones that are really hard to find during postseason scouting because they're the ones that get covered up like right away. So you have to be really, diligent and you have to scout for licking branches, and they might be small. And so pay attention to like where the leaves are thinner, not like maybe they have just a single layer of leaves or something, and you can kind of tell they were disturbed at one point. Look for a licking branch there, because if you can find 6 or 7 of those in a row, a buck is going right along that at some point.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if it's a big scrape or not. If there's a big buck in the area, he's going to use those at some point.
Right. And then it just becomes a matter of timing when he's going to use those. Because the benefit of that community scrape is that it's kind of like 7-Eleven.
Yep.
It's open for business all the time.
Yep.
Challenge is figuring out like at what periods is the buck that you're trying to kill, or a good buck, going to be in that area. And you don't have to necessarily hunt over top the scrape, but in the area of that scrape, right?
How far away from it do you have to be to make it work?
With that scrape line,
it's like a Tootsie Pop.
Right. It's the Tootsie Pop scrape. We just coined it. The Tootsie Pop scrape. That scrape line that you're talking about is more, when is that like one or I don't know how long the period would be, like the 1 or 2 week period where that thing's actually going to be worth anything.
Right.
Because that's what that becomes, is like, what's that small window of the entire year that it's even going to be relevant?
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
And that's like there was one that was like that I hunted in Ohio before that was a scrape line that had a couple big deer on it. And I mean, I would have swore there was enough daylight activity on it that I would have swore if you sat that thing for like 3 days, like in that scrape line somewhere, that you were going to see a really good buck. And I did that year. This is probably like 6 years ago, and saw one young buck, and that was it. And that's just a matter of me not being there the right week, you know what I mean, or the right 3 days or the right 4 days, like, because in that scrape line basically after that like dried up was done, and it only opens for like a very specific kind of amount of time, and then it's done.
Yeah. Well, and it's the same thing with I ran cameras on 2 different scrapes that are only like 60 yards apart for the last couple of years, and I told you that one day I went in there and hunted. I didn't pull the camera. I don't remember why I didn't pull the card that day, but remember I told you I saw 2 bears the one day, and then later on I checked that camera and I'm like, this was a spot that I was like, the year was different than it has been for a while because there was so many acorns this year. Mm-hmm. And they use the scrapes differently because there is some new habitat management going on. So the times really changed. Like, it wasn't my typical, like normally I get like the 15th, 16th of October, like the scrape opens up and then there's a whole bunch of activity. This was like very like last 2 days of October and then November. And that's kind of like, I usually get some good activity then, but that's kind of late for this thing. And I was like, it's going to, like, I would get a picture of a buck and be like, oh, it's going to pop off any minute now. I got to go hunt it. And I was convinced, like, I will see a deer on this. And I think I hunted it way more than I think I hunted it 4 or 5 times through the whole season, like, spread out by a week probably. And I remember hunting it and seeing those 2 bears and be like, I guess I just overhunted it. I guess I shouldn't have been in here like that. Well, you know what? I just had to try. It's fine. And I checked that camera in rifle season, and the day before I hunted it for the 5th time or whatever it was, that 8-pointer with the big white spot on his neck that I showed, he was on it the day before I hunted, and the day after I hunted, and the day after that. I was like, you son of a gun. So it's one of those things, like, even if it is a window, like, you have to, what I did wrong there was, like, I think I just went too much off of history and was like, oh, these are the dates that it's going to happen. So as soon as I see something, but I didn't really take into consideration the habitat changes that were going on, and maybe that doe family group that is normally in there, if I'm going to say I think they shifted a little bit, like how they were using that terrain.
So let me ask you a question. So that back to that scrape line that pops up.
Yeah.
Right. And because it's close to a community scrape that you have.
Yeah.
Right. So when that scrape line opens up, does that community scrape start to peter out? Like, is the activity moved from that community scrape to the now opened scrape line?
Yeah, I think they just kind of, I think it does. Yeah. So they'll use that scrape line, and then when the rut starts to kick in or die down and you get back into that secondary rut, then or just in general, the community scrape gets reopened.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And actually, the day that I hit that buck, he was actually using the community scrape.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, yeah. That's actually how I saw him. Like, I told you on the phone how horrible that morning was.
Yeah.
Because I got up that tree, the first tree I picked.
Was this the day that the squirrel jumped out?
The squirrel. I put my hand around the back of the tree and put my hand in a hole. And all of a sudden, I'm trying to, like, move branches out of the way from another tree, and all of a sudden you hear this, like, and this squirrel runs over my hand and scares the crap out. Like, it scratched my hand up, scares the crap out of me, falls on the ground. Then I realize the tree's hollow and it's going to be real windy that day. Like later on, it was supposed to get windy. And I'm like, well, this sucks. So I climbed down out of the tree because I didn't want to be in a tree with mad squirrels all day.
Right.
And I went and found another tree. Didn't really like that one. And I found a third tree that is way too big. Like, I could almost not fit my arms around it, which is not a good tree to hunt out of a saddle.
Right. Yeah.
And there was no cover, but there was really not another really good option. Like, there wasn't really a really great option in there. So I was like, well, I'm going to pick, use the tree as cover and pick the best angle for this tree. So I got up in the tree, and of course, I knew the canopy was kind of low in there, so I only brought 3 sticks, and I should have probably had more, or I could have, practiced harder at my one sticking skills. But I used the tree, and so the morning was just kind of like, it's like one of those mornings where you're like, I might as well just go home.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, stick it out. And right away, like, I see a 7-pointer at the top of the second doe bedding area behind me. And I grunted at him, and he's like looking around, like, what's going on? Then he goes back to feeding, goes to move away, grunt at him again, does that again, grunt at him a third time. And now he's like doing this, like looking all over to try to see where the buck was, and this spike buck runs in from above him, just like tearing it up, like coming to get me, and he sees the spike buck and he's like, oh, there it is. And he just runs after that, and he's down the ridge. And shortly after they left, a doe came through, went into the bedding area behind me, and she had dropped down off of that, real wide point. And, 10 minutes, I'm like, oh, that's good. Maybe she saw it. 10 minutes later, I see shadows of an antlers coming down that point. And I was like, holy crap, that looks like, I see antler shadows, and I can see the deer turns his head, and I see that long G4, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I cannot, like, that's the biggest buck we have on camera right now. And he puts his antlers in that community scrape licking branch, and he's like working the scrape real good. And he goes to go down the hill away from me. And I hit one on my grunt tube, and he flipped his head and just came on a beeline. And the only cover that I have between him and I now is one laurel bush. So he's like, I didn't even have time to think about it. I grabbed my bow and drew, because by the time I had grabbed my bow, he was ready to clear that laurel bush. I'm like, once he comes out from behind that, he's got like 3 twigs to go behind, and he's going to be in a 20-yard lane. So I had my bow drawn, and I'm getting ready for him to come into the 20. And when I settled my string, I was like, oh, my freaking face mask's in my way. And I did one of these, and kind of like my eyes came off the buck. When I put my bow back up, he had gone into the 30. So that's where the low part of my shot came from. And then I was so jacked up from like messing everything up that I didn't take the time to stop him. And he was like, he wasn't running by any means. Like, he was still walking, but he was like, that stiff leg, like, where's the buck? I'm going to kick his butt,
Right.
And I hit him low and back. So to me, it looked like I hit liver, but in all reality, I think I just went through the meat below his rib cage. Right at the back of his rib cage. And I ended up waiting 8 hours, looking for him, not finding him, tracked him for 200 yards, getting a dog after another 8 hours of waiting. Couldn't find him with the dog. Dog had some interest in going way down the mountain, like half a mile from where I had last blood. And the dog owner was like, he might, I can't really tell. He doesn't really look all that enthused. So I went back the next day and gridded with a friend. And I was like, we checked cameras first. I was like, I don't even know where to look. Like, to be completely honest, we just looked in all the areas. So I'm like, well, I guess we just look in the direction of where we ended the blood trail and just scout for a big buck. I started scouting for a big buck, and I'm like, oh, look at all these beds. Like, this is a big buck bed. Oh, this is a big buck bed. I'm like marking them for like, make sure I come back to this in the spring. And I took my foot off the last one, and there's a big pile of blood right under my boot. I'm like, holy crap. And I called him over. I'm like, there's blood. And like, I followed this blood down this really steep hill. Now we're like a mile away from where I hit this deer. And we track the blood to the bottom of the hill and lose it again. And I'm like, well, there's benches here. We'll just grid these benches. So we kind of just wove through a ditch, hit 2 benches, came up to like a flat that was above this bench below a cliff. And, you know, I'm just kind of waiting there. And he's like, I'm going to circle down the end of this flat where it pinches off above these benches and see if there's anything, if he's laying over there. And all of a sudden I hear my buddy like, I got him. And I'm like, no, like he was far. So I'm like, no way. I'm running through the woods and I hear something. I like look to my right and I can see the big G4 just running full bore over top of these giant boulders. And he runs way down into this ditch, and he, you know, my buddy comes running up. He's like, did you see him? He looked hurt. And I'm like, he didn't look hurt to me. He was just flying over boulders.
Right.
He was like, he was laying in rocks. Like he literally found him in a big pile of rocks, like nothing else. So we were like, well, maybe that was like his last hurrah, and he's going to be laying right over here. So we get down this ditch, and then we just see this buck like running up this. We caught up to him again. We see him running up this side hill, like this steep, 300 foot. And I'm like, that deer's not hurt. Like,
Right.
And we found no more blood and
To
had
traverse
no more,
something like that that quickly, it's like
no more direction after that. So it's like, I put in 20 miles in 2 days between biking and hiking to find that deer. And I think I got closure. Like, I think he's alive. Like,
right.
I'd like to think he is. And I just think I made a bad shot. It happens. But, you learn a lot when you follow a big deer like that. Like a couple of his beds we found, like single laurel bushes in the middle of flat, wide open nothingness. Like I found a couple like that where it was just his bed, one laurel bush, and like you could play baseball in there.
Well, it's like the one shed up in the one bed up in the North Piece.
Yeah.
That we found out from where, like from that cut.
Yeah.
Where I had a cell camera.
Yeah.
There was just literally one single bed out there. Literally, it was under a laurel bush.
Yeah.
And it was
when we were with Chad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was totally not where I would think that bed would be.
No, because it's not right. That wasn't right on the edge. It was basically in the middle of the flat area up there.
It was a good 50 yards off the edge, like I would say. They do strange things, man.
Yeah.
I sometimes feel like the more we learn about them, the only thing that we really know definitively is that we know less than we think we did. Than we think we do, or than we did
100%.
before. It's like the more I learn, the less I actually think that I know.
Yeah.
That makes
But
sense.
I think there's one benefit to things like we did today is like you were just talking about, we were talking about how the dog, thinking about how the dogs use the wind as you use the quail and the dog is the deer. Like those are really good situations to put yourself in.
Oh yeah.
And any practice that you can get at a smaller animal with less pressure or whatever it is, just to have fun, makes you so much of a better deer hunter in general. Like you can go, like sometimes I like to go stalking through the woods for squirrels, like still hunting. Because like the traditional, like, oh, go sit for a while and you'll see a squirrel. Well, do you ever try still hunting them? Because does it really matter if you kill 6 squirrels? No, it doesn't.
Dude, kill a booner squirrel.
Booner squirrel. We can do the hunting public thing like they do with turkeys and measure the
Right.
squirrel.
Yeah, get the long squirrel.
Yeah, the long squirrel. That's what we should name this podcast, the long squirrel.
The long squirrel.
But seriously, like it'll teach you something.
Oh yeah.
Like anything that you can do in the woods hunting, people are like, what thing can I read? What thing can make me better? All that stuff is great. All the podcast, everything that you can learn is great in the time that you're learning it. But the only way you're actually going to learn anything about hunting at all is to actually just go and
You can have yeah. I mean, you can have people.
You can be accelerated for sure.
Yeah, you can have people tell you the information
Mm-hmm.
as much as you would like.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm trying to figure out how to say it. Like, there's always the application part of it that is you having to do it.
Exactly.
You know, there's no, a good example is like when I go scout with you, or when you and I scout together, or when I've scouted with Greg, or I've scouted with Chad or whoever, right? Like, I'll pick up little things that they're doing, or like when we'll talk about stuff, while we're kind of scouting. But I don't really learn things that I'm watching them do or that I'm absorbing until like I actually have to go do it for myself.
Exactly.
Right. Like, that's when you actually really learn something, is when you have to apply the thing that you just kind of academically picked up.
Right.
And there's a lot of different ways to pick that up, whether it's videos or whatever. And there's a lot of, easy ways to pick that up. I mean, like listening to podcasts, but like, you shouldn't just listen to whomever talk about whatever tactic, strategy, whatever on the podcast. You should go like, you should hear it and be like, okay, how do I actually apply that now?
Right. How does it work for you?
How does that work for you, for me? Or if you follow someone around, it's like, great, you just got a glimpse into how it works for them.
Right.
Right. I've always said, like, in Dan's, I've talked about this with Dan Enfall, where, people historically have taken a lot of what he said as gospel, like when it's, related to, hunting beds. Right. But, what he's really doing is he's hunting bedding areas, and it's not necessarily like a specific bed. Sometimes it is,
right.
But it, by like a general rule of thumb, is he's hunting a bedding area that he knows a buck is using, and that bedding area could be an acre, it could be 5 acres, it just could be more than that. It just depends on how big that bedding area is, right? And how well he has it kind of dialed in. But what he really kind of does is he gives you a framework for how to think about finding
exactly
a bedding area that would be suitable for bucks to want to spend time or to use, right? Yeah. And you don't necessarily need to follow him around the woods necessarily to know that.
Right.
Like, you just listen to how he describes it and get a sense for the attributes he's looking for. And then you have to kind of go find those for yourself, and then understand like how that actually applies to the areas that you hunt. And it's not that he's saying you always will find a bed here. I've scouted plenty of military crests in the past and not found a buck bed.
Right.
Right. Like, they don't exist in all of them,
right.
Necessarily. But I found a lot of beds because he gave me a framework of talking to him and listening to him going, when you have these types of conditions and a military crest, and there's a really good chance that you're going to find something. And if I don't find a bed, I'm probably going to find some sign, and then that will probably end up leading me to a bed. Right. And I think that's part of the, I think what I hope people, take from podcasts and stuff like that is that, this stuff isn't gospel.
Yeah.
It's one person's approach and how they've kind of refined it,
Right.
And Chad and I even talked about that a little bit,
I was going to say, like, Chad just said, like, hey man, in the accidental podcast drop.
Yeah. That I put out a week early, or like, you're sorry guys. Like,
Chad said, you just need to go out and, like, cause they say, how far can I push it? He's like, you just need to go out and see how far that is until you mess it up once. And then you'll figure out how far is too far.
You're not going to this is the thing. Like, when you're trying something new, there's never been, I shouldn't say never. I don't like absolutes.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say that you will very rarely find a person who is trying something new for the first time that doesn't screw it up.
Yeah. And
doesn't matter what it is.
Whitetails, you might not even know.
You might be screwing it up, think you're doing it right for 10 years. You know what I mean? Like, that's just, kind of the game. But you're right. I mean, you do have to, at some point, just go mess some stuff up.
Yeah.
And figure it out. And it's not the end of the world messing it up. It's the thing that's going to help you most quickly kind of adapt or adopt whatever that thing is that you're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, and if you think of it this way, if you have 5 or 6 spots and you mess 2 of them up, is that really a big deal? You still have, 3 or 4 more.
Well, I mean, and then it just goes back to the idea of like spending your time in the postseason. I have a little bit of like I don't want to say love-hate relationship. It's not the right way, because I love scouting. So, but over time, I think my feelings on postseason scouting are morphing a little bit, in a kind of weird way. Because what I was going to say is that, looking for those spots, it's like then it becomes really important. Maybe less so that you understand everything, and that you spend the time in the timber, boots on the ground, postseason, and just finding spots so you can try things that you've heard of, and go screw them up, and you've got enough spots to kind of go screw stuff up and learn and still be able to have good hunts.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's value into covering a lot of ground in postseason scouting, but then when you find that good spot is like, find the spots in the spots, because then you're making that spot.
So this
more
is where
valuable.
I've changed a little bit, right? Because that's kind of what I used to do.
Just cover ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same thing.
And find, and then if I found a spot, then find spot within the spot, right? I would dissect the spot.
Yeah, and I think it's competition too. Like everybody's like, "Oh, I put 150 miles on my boots this year," and it's like,
right,
okay,
yeah, I did not, or whatever. So this is because what made me think of it was I was talking to our buddy Dan Johnson, Mr. Nine Fingers. I was talking to him. We were actually talking about this, and I used to kind of scout diligently, and when I found an area that I thought was good or whatever, whether it's a terrain feature or like historical sign up there, or whatever it is that trips your trigger.
Yeah.
Then I would spend like time in that particular spot, kind of trying to break it down. Like, all right, where's the deer coming from?
Yeah.
Where would I potentially set up? What tree would I want? Just all the things you kind of go through when you find a spot, right? But what I started realizing is that all I actually really know at that moment is that this spot seems to be an area that deer are spending a little bit more time in than the other spots that I've been through, because it has an aggregate sign. Right. What I don't know necessarily, especially if it's a new spot, and this is what we're kind of talking about now, is brand new spots.
Yep.
What I don't know is when the sign was laid down. What I don't know is what type of deer or caliber of deer, maturity, age class of deer, or you spot. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I don't know other than at one point in time, and if the sign was from just last year, at one point last year,
we're here often.
Sign, right? So what I've started kind of doing is finding these spots and then marking, and then actually revisiting them during the hunting season, not spending a ton of time. So it's almost like my postseason scouting has almost become like a perpetual speed scout.
Yeah.
Where I don't spend a whole lot of time at any one place. I just kind of rip through.
Yeah.
And if it looks decent, I hang a camera and I move on, and I go back and say like, oh man, there's deer here all year round.
Right.
Right. Or there's not deer here all year round. Let's let it here. Let's come back and check it periodically during the fall, see when the sign actually gets laid down.
Right.
That way now I have a better idea of what its actual value, right? As opposed to spending 2 hours breaking it down. It's only good for making this up, but it's only good for 2 days out of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In those 2 days, it's like, and there's not even a good bucket in that area.
Yeah.
It is.
I think the other thing too that I'm going to be doing more of this postseason is, when we talk about there's nothing wrong with putting miles on. Like if you're in an area for the first time and you just need to see it, and you need to find the good cover, like walk that crap as fast as you can, mark a couple things, and just be like, this is where the best cover was, then go back. But in general, like I'll even scout. I've scouted old properties like that. Like, oh, I just want to check out this ridge line, and you're like, there's got to be a shed over the next, whatever, and you just like walk a straight line. And you're like, oh, this looks good. Hang some cameras here, and you mark an area to hang a camera, and you go back to hang your camera. You might walk the same area, or you just get in there as quick as you can and hang the camera and get out. Now I have no plan. So I think one thing that I would definitely want to do better this year is like old spots and new spots, or a spot that I visited more than once. Even if it's only the second time, I'm almost going to like pretend, like when people find a shed, they do loops around it to try to find the other one. I want to do that with my spot because I want to find the best way to get in to that spot. Like if I know, especially if it's like a spot that I've, like you just said, hang a camera, go see when that sign was laid. Now I know when that sign was laid. So, okay, this is a new spot that I know is good. Now I want to go and hunt that spot. But all you know is how to walk there on a straight line all the way down the ridge. Like, how can I get there best from the main access? Or if I need a backdoor access, or if I need two directions in from a main access to access it from two winds. If it's a spot you can hunt on more winds. I want to do better at just knowing the whole area around that, to know the best way that I can get in there and not mess it up, because we just talked about like you need to mess some things up. Well, I know I mess that up from time to time, and that's what I need to get better at. Most of my access is really good, and that's why I have encounters, but like it can be better. I know it can be better.
Yeah. And that's the one thing that I would say that I will spend time in the postseason. Like if I think a spot can be good, I will try to figure out like what the access options. And I'll actually walk.
Yeah.
In the postseason, like, and I'll time.
So I might even put bright eyes in trees this year. I'm not gonna lie, because how many times you go in, you're like, oh, there's plenty of trees in there, and then a squirrel runs over your hand and
jumps
you
out
almost
face.
piss your pants. And he did give me a little scratch. He drew some blood.
Let it go. Yeah.
Got the rabies.
Got the rabies. Got the Cujo.
My daughter had to get rabies shots this year.
Did she really?
Yeah. There's a bat in her room.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I think. Well, I don't remember you telling me she had rabies shots. But I remember.
Yeah, she had a bat in her room, and the doctor said there's a bat in her room, and she was asleep. She should get rabies shots. Yeah. So that was unfortunate.
Rabies shots aren't pleasant either, are they?
There's like that big rumor that they're these giant needles that you get like 18 shots in your belly. It's not true. It was 4 shots. She got 2 the first time. It was like IgG, and then a rabies vaccine, and then she had to get 2 other rabies vaccines. They're like day 1, and then day 7, and day 14. So it wasn't overly pleasant. Rabies vaccines aren't overly pleasant, but they're not as bad as the
old wives' tale.
As the old wives' tale. Yeah.
So for this upcoming kind of off season, sit here, or sort of, let's call it late January.
Yeah.
Like what's the thing that you really want to focus on? Is it that like access piece of it? Is that like gonna be?
Yeah, I think that is. I think just I would say access and exit, but like just really solidifying the spots to know like, hey, this is the spot for this day. And not necessarily like I'm only going to get one day to hunt that spot, but just like I know this access is dynamite for this situation. And because I know, because I've looped this area around instead of just walked on a straight line and just to cover miles. Because I'm one of those people who likes to I like covering miles. I like being like, not as a competition. I don't track. I would guess, so I probably like 150 miles every spring, or maybe somewhere around 175, something like that. It's probably,
You're in the woods a lot.
Yeah. I have time to do it, and That's what I like to do. And so that's probably how many miles I put on, but I'm not worried about, I want to worry less about how many miles I put on. If I can find a quality spot, I will put 2 miles on. I don't care. If those 2 miles, you know, if all the pots are gold or in those 2 miles, that's what I want. I don't want the,
Yeah. I mean, dude,
I don't want the other
I'm all
stuff.
about efficiency.
Yeah.
Like, may sound terrible to some people, but man, as little as I need to do would be maximum effect.
And it's not because you're lazy. It's because you're smart.
Right. I mean, there's nothing in my life suggests that I'm lazy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, but what I am all about is doing as many things as I can that I enjoy.
Yeah.
So if I can do things effectively, quickly, where I get to do more of the things I like to do, then that's my game.
Yeah.
That's what I think. And but you know, I do like you. I do enjoy being out in the timber. This is actually one of my favorite times of year to out.
It is. Scouting is one of my favorite things about deer hunting.
It's funny because you always hear that. You know, people always say enjoying the process is how you get to like. You gotta love the process and like
Yeah.
type of thing. And I would say that I fit that. Like I actually get really excited whenever postseason is here because I have a short attention span.
Yeah.
And so for me, the exciting part is that nothing I did last year matters.
Right.
And it's all brand.
Right.
And so now it's all a brand new story. Right. You know,
Exactly.
So I'm maximally engaged now because it's all blue ocean.
Right.
You know? And I get excited by that. Even in like my work, like I get excited by blue ocean. I hate whenever like someone's like, "Oh, it's a blue box. We need to make a blue box." Well, if you know the box is blue, you make it.
Right.
I'm kind of the same way with bow hunting, where you know, as I'm in the season, I love to hunt. But there comes a point of the season where I start to get, oh, I'm doing rinse repeat. All right, I need to slate.
Right.
You know, which is part of why this year I just really enjoyed, you know, not checking trail cameras. And
Yeah.
I don't want to say winging it because I had a lot of information about the places I was hunting.
Sure.
You know, but to a degree was winging.
Right.
You know, my plan was to make a plan. When I had the information.
Exactly.
Which sounds really kind of dumb.
Right.
You know, but that was kind of my approach.
Yeah.
And it kept it fresh for me. It kept me interested.
Yeah. I mean, and you're so right about all that. And really it is all in the process of deer hunting. Like if you don't like to scout, if we're talking about big wood situation, especially, because you could probably go out west and have a decent hunt in a week without knowing an area by glassing and learning that way in that time frame. You can't really do that where we hunt very well. I mean, there's some opportunity for glassing here and there, but like, let's be real. Unless you're glassing 40 yards in the woods, it ain't happening.
Unless you have adjacent ag.
Yeah.
And real good ag.
And I've had a lot of people come to me this year and ask it like, "Oh, can you help me get started hunting?" And you know, after we get past the like, you need to take your safety course and that kind of thing.
Right.
I get to the like, you know, you got to learn about an animal. Like they make sign. This is the sign they make. You want to learn how to understand it? If the answer is like, yeah, but I want to kill it. Like, yeah, you have to do this part first. And if you don't want to, then you should probably think like of taking up golf or something, you know, like, and most people are intrigued by the process because the process, like you said, is where it's fun. Even in the end process, like, packing a deer out sucks balls and it is fun. Like dragging the deer, you know, across a bean field in Kansas can suck, but it is fun.
It's fun,
you know? And I remember like this year, my buddy.
The parts that suck the most are always the most fun.
Yeah. I remember, you know, my buddy shot a buck with his bow this year. And it was the first one we got to pack out. And I remember we both put it on our backs and we were tired. And we both put that deer on our backs and was like, ugh. thank God the truck's only a mile away this time. You know,
right. Yeah, it's I'm always excited for this time of year. My hunting season.
Yeah, mine's not either yet either. Yeah,
where I live, have a few more weeks, but I'm always thankful whenever it does kind of. I don't want to say thankful. I don't want to seem like I don't enjoy hunting season, but for me this year, because I filled tags early, I've been kind of sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah,
kind of voluntarily because I have tags I could fill if I want.
Right,
kind of stay like a kid. But when the season finally ends, and my season starts.
Right.
You know, because essentially I've been sitting, waiting, patiently.
Yeah.
To kind of get back out of the timber. So before we shut this thing down, we've been rock and rolling here for close to an hour and 15. But what is the thing you're most looking forward to during this postseason?
I think just getting out with buddies, man, and, you know, learning a few things from them and them learning a few things from me and just enjoying the networking and hanging out and just being in the woods. I just love being in the woods, man.
You heard it here first, folks. Hepler loves being in the woods.
That's where you'll find me.
Squirrel attacks man while hunting at 11. All right, gang. Appreciate you guys listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening, and if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there as well. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. And before I shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.